It's December. Another year is nearly finished. They just fly by, and the older you get, the faster they fly. Before you listen to the podcast today, I'd like to ask you to donate to the Kaidanki. I listen to other podcasts about the supernatural, but I truly believe the Kaidanki offers something different from all of them. Stories from around the world, stories from all different genres and time periods. I try to keep the focus on the stories and the authors, but one thing I can't do right now is pay them for their submissions, and I would just love to do that. But I need your help. During the month of December, I'm asking for your support. You can donate through Ko-fi, PayPal, or Patreon. All the links are in the podcast description and the episode description. Thank you for listening. And now, here's the Kaidanki. Hello, and welcome to the Kaidanki, where we read a story about the supernatural every week. I'm your host, Linda Gould, and I'm so happy to present today's story, My Darling Zombie, by Ronan O'Driscoll. O'Driscoll gives the Kaidanki the first zombie story. I'm pretty sure it's the first. And he takes a slightly different approach to the typical zombie story. It's funny and gross, a little weird, and very surprising. Ronan O'Driscoll is the author of Poor Farm and Chief O'Neill. Poor Farm is an imagining of what might happen to an autistic man in the 19th century Nova Scotia, and Chief O'Neill is about an Irishman who ended up as Chicago's chief of police. See O'Driscoll's full bio in the episode description. Here is My Darling Zombie by Ronan O'Driscoll. Enjoy. The zombie sat at her kitchen table, face twice as ghoulish in the faint light from his phone. Keiko did her best to ignore him. She had a lot going on these days. There was the trip to the doctor tomorrow, and this whole fiasco with her mother's cat. She pressed the button on the zojirushi and focused on the tepid water gurgling over her peppermint tea bag. The zombie moaned mildly. Keiko shot a glance at him. She had fed him, hadn't she? Pigbrain was not easy to come by, and Okamoto, the old butcher, was getting suspicious. She told him it was for her pet snake. The moaning grew insistent. Keiko put down her cup and reached for the phone. He had let the screen lock again. She unlocked it and put it back in his mildewed hand. He quieted and recommenced scrolling. A little dribble of black ichor fell from his chin onto the screen. Keiko frowned. Darling, she said. Hey, you! It was so difficult to get his attention. I'm going to watch TV now. There's a documentary about menopause. He made no reply. She took her cup into their front room and settled under the kotats. It always took some fumbling to figure out the remote. It had more buttons than a keyboard. He used to navigate it for them. Now all of his complicated entertainment options went neglected. Eventually the screen jerked alive. A cartoon of an aging woman, age indicated by her slight hunch and lined face, contorted with exasperation from a hot flash. The graphic had thin lines indicating inadequate hormones coursing through her body and into her brain. Keiko sighed before deeply inhaling from her cup. Despite the tea's aroma, the foul fug of his rotting cadaver permeated the house. She hated his stench most of all. She had tried opening all the windows to air the place out, but he had groaned at the sunlight. After a small sip, she put the cup down and closed her eyes. At least they didn't need to heat the place as much. Cold didn't bother him. As the documentary droned on, she put her head down on the table and closed her eyes. Totori sand dune, struggling up that impossibly high slope of sand, laughing at each other and kissing at the top. School kids pointing and giggling. A school trip, maybe? running back down to fading shrieking, a quizzical camel traipsing back and forth offering rides. Later, staying at a cheap inn in Matsue, their room long and narrow, with old bachelors snoring behind thin walls. Keiko startled awake, looking around and dry swallowing absent-mindedly. Her tea was cold. The program had changed to some interminable variety show. She got up, stiff, and turned the TV off at the source. She listened to the silence for a moment or two, then went to bed. She was dead asleep when he ambled into the room, noisily making his way under the covers. His withered lips were pulled back, revealing a rictus of teeth and a distended tongue. He rolled towards her, a lusty rattle emerging from his throat as he attempted to touch her. "Hey!" said Keiko, pushing him away. "Don't you touch me!" The zombie slumped back, quiet. After a while, he turned over. Keiko stared at the ceiling. A spear of streetlight came through their half-closed curtain and landed between them. She realized it was shining through the hole in his chest cavity. I loved how that was just such a simple story, how it provided a glimpse into this couple's ordinary life, that things continue on as they always have. But I especially like it because I think it was kind of ambiguous about whether this couple is human or, of course, if one is a real zombie. I've spoken with so many people about their relationships, and I think many human relationships could be described as zombie-like. You know, little interaction, repetition, habit über alles. And to be honest, one of the things I'll always remember from the mother of a former boyfriend is when she told me that she was happy to have split from her husband because she didn't like his smell and she was disgusted by his appearance. I guess that's why I like this story, because it made me recall her words, and maybe I've seen those words as a bit of a wake-up call, and this story as a bit of a wake-up call for all of us in long-term relationships. No judgment on anyone's lifestyle, but maybe we should all be a little more careful not to fall into a rut, to maybe take care of our personal hygiene a little better. And on that note, I think I'll go brush my teeth and get out of these pajamas at 3 p.m. Thank you for listening today. Next week, we meet the sleep demon, but sleep is anything but assured. As always, please review the podcast, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and now YouTube. All the information is in the podcast and episode descriptions. Thank you for listening today. See you next week.